Hey everyone, just a quick bit before the video starts. I'd originally done the testing for this around the 30th of September, 1st of October, and there have been a lot of patches, almost daily patches, to CS2 since then. So the performance you're going to see in this video may not necessarily be representative of how the game actually performs as of the date that you're watching this video. Just wanted to add this bit in before or after the fact, just so you're aware of that. But yeah, let's get into the video now. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Now, I am a bit late to the party here because I didn't actually realise CS2 had came out until 4 or 5 days afterwards. But I'm here now, so we're going to have a look at how it performs on the 3060 Ti at a few different resolutions. So, one of the big upgrades for CS2 over the original CSGO is the upgrade to Valve's Source 2 engine, which brings along with it vastly improved lighting, reflections, and the ability of smoke to interact with the environment. There's been various under the hood tweaks, and also tweaks to the audio and animations as well. Several maps have also received complete overhauls, with other maps remaining largely the same, with only tweaks to the lighting and reflections, although those maps also benefit from the newly improved smoke, audio and animations as well. One thing that immediately struck me about CS2, which I actually didn't like at all, is the fact that you're forced to do a 12-round training match. I couldn't actually see a way to skip that at all. Which is fair enough if you're new to the game, having never played CSGO before, or CS Source, or CS 1.6 or whatever it was before that. But I have dozens and dozens of hours into the game, and yet I still couldn't skip it. There is nothing new to me in the tutorial at all. But yeah, that's my only gripe with the game so far. Once you've passed that though, the rest of the game does open up to you, although you are locked out of Premier, Competitive and Wingman modes. You have to play enough casual or deathmatch matches to get your rank up high enough to actually unlock those modes. But we'll probably stick to bot matches though, for the sake of convenience. So first I'm going to go to the settings. I figured I would max them out just to keep things simple. We do have a very high preset, so I'm going to assume that's maxed everything out. So we're going to do a competitive practice match first. Mirage is a map I used quite a lot when I tested CSGO originally. So I'm going to use that as a sort of tester to get my first impressions of the game. The training maps didn't really count because I wasn't using the same settings as I am now. We're already getting hundreds of FPS. This is a good start. That will probably drop as the action starts to heat up a bit. This is when that's definitely something that's been worked on, because the initial combat in the first round, usually, from my experience of benchmarking it on other processor graphics cards at least, usually is quite stuttery then. It usually has some kind of stutter at least. So things seem all well and good so far. I'm not noticing any performance drops or issues at all. No noticeable stuttering or hitches anyway. Everything seems very smooth so far. We've not really dropped under 250-ish FPS so far. Now, the reflections here look really good in this area. That's definitely a major improvement made on Mirage over CSGO. And yet, that's one of the big upgrades made to CSGO, is the Source 2 engine's vastly improved lighting and presumably reflections as well. Mirage is probably one of those maps that they've not really made any changes to. They've just tweaked their lighting and reflections and things like that. And there. Now we've got our first look at the smoke. It looks very different to CSGO, but it actually kind of looks out of place in a way, if that makes any sense. It looks like it shouldn't actually be there. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure if I like that. But yeah, everything seems good so far, so we'll change to another map and look at performance there. Ancient is another map that I've used quite a lot in testing, so this is another good one for me personally anyway to test. There was a little bit of stuttering there just as the match got going, as the other bots were running past. But that's probably just an exception to how it's actually going to perform. No more stuttering or hitches so far. The frame times are a bit inconsistent there, but the frame rate is so high just now that it doesn't really matter anyway. Now, I'm not familiar enough with the maps in CSGO for me to actually notice all of the major changes, but in general, things just seem to be sharper and more detailed. Like textures on the walls, and this bit here on the wood. Things just seem to be sharper. This is kind of what we're getting here as well, as the improved lighting, because the lighting in here is definitely far better than it was in the original CSGO. So let's go find some enemies to fire at. I've only noticed some slight stuttering so far, like very momentary stutter so far, when all of the bots were running past you. Even at worst in this map, it's still over 150 FPS. Competitive players aren't going to be using the maximum settings. They're going to be reducing the settings as far as they can to get the highest frame rate within reason. But if you have a 3060 Ti, you can still turn the settings up as high as possible at 1080p and still get some pretty competitive frame rates. We're back into Mirage now at 1440p. And at the start here we're getting 180 FPS. That will obviously drop. One thing to mention though is that while I am doing this at 1440p, I am using Nvidia's super resolution. So it's 1440p downscaled to the 1080p monitor I'm using. So it technically is actual 1440p, but the downscaling back to 1080p potentially might be affecting performance. I'm not sure if it actually does, but just so there's full disclosure there. But yeah, performance seems to be perfectly fine so far. I better actually choose a weapon before the match starts. But yeah, I'm getting almost 200 FPS here. Let's go find an enemy. So the frame rate's not really dropping much below 130. That's the worst it's been so far. I need to find some actual enemies to shoot at. But I haven't noticed any stuttering or hitches so far. It is definitely a lot more GPU. The game is definitely a lot more GPU intensive than the original CSGO was. But yeah, I'm not noticing any problems so far on the 3060 Ti. I'll get into some more combat and then probably move on to Ancient again, just to see what that's like. And enemies would be at a different location to where I'm actually running at, wouldn't they? So let's move on to Ancient. There's not any big drops so far on Ancient, although that might change as we actually get up to some enemies, if I can actually find them. Because I'm trying to actually chat and play at the same time, so I'm completely forgetting the usual route I take through this map. Because I normally have an idea of where the enemies are going to be in the first couple of rounds, and then I just lose track of everything. But yeah, when there's not much going on and there's just some of your teammates running around, it isn't really much of a problem at 1440p. That was a bit unfair. This isn't going to go too well because I don't have a diffusion kit. Okay, so let's have another go at that and see if we can actually find some enemies. So far, I'm actually quite impressed with the performance, given how much better the game looks graphically, and how much more intensive it is to run GPU wise. It's running pretty well maxed out at 1440p on the 3060 Ti so far. About 130 FPS is the worst I've seen so far in this game. Yeah, hide. Yeah, about about 130 FPS is the worst I'm seeing in actual gameplay. Like with 1080p, you're probably still going to get the odd momentary bit of stuttering, but yeah, it doesn't really happen in actual gameplay at all. So you're going to be perfectly fine, maxed out at 1440p on a 3060 Ti here. I'll have a quick look at 4K as well. At least at a standstill here before the match actually starts. It's pretty decent, over 100 FPS. I wasn't expecting that. That'll drop once we get into the actual match. I'll let my teammates run past first. The frame rate does drop to the mid to high 70s there. If my teammates actually moved, I might actually be able to hit the enemies. There is a 68 FPS drop there. But yeah, we're back up to over 100 now. In general, so far, we seem to be in the mid 70s-ish, which is pretty decent. The 3060 Ti, while relatively powerful, it is, when it was released, a mid-range card. So the fact we're getting 60 plus FPS here, 70 plus FPS here at 4K is pretty decent. So the start here, we're getting, it's like the teammates run past first. Still in the mid 60s here, which is pretty decent. I was expecting sub 60 FPS there, given that Ancient is one of the harder to run maps in the game. I am noticing some stuttering. I think it's stuttering. It's either stuttering or VSync being off, causing tearing, making it look like it's stuttering. So it'll probably be true for, I think, Anubis and any of the other maps that tend to be harder to run. I am still quite impressed we are getting this kind of performance at 4K on a last gen mid-range card, which is pretty decent. So yeah, we're around 60 FPS there. When you get into more intense firefights, whether that be in bot matches or online, you are likely to see some sub 60 FPS drops on maps like Ancient and probably Anubis as well. So overall, I'm quite impressed with CS2 and the upgrades it's made over the original CSGO. I quite like the new user interface. I think it looks a lot more modern. It looks like it doesn't make the game look like it's originally from 2012, which is fine, but considering CSGO had been around for 11 years before this, having the same user interface for over a decade, it kind of got a bit stale for me. I'm also really liking the new lighting and reflection system as well. That is a major improvement. Even though CSGO is mainly a competitive game, for me personally, I'm not bored about that. So the graphical improvements are definitely a big plus for me. Now, I can see there being some argument over the new smoke in CS2 and whether or not it's actually better than the original CSGO. Yes, it does interact with the environment, which it didn't before, but for me personally, I really think it looks completely out of place. It doesn't look like the smoke is meant to be there at all. It really breaks the immersion when you're playing a game. But all of that aside, performance wise, I'm really impressed with how it performs on the 4060 Ti. We're getting near 60 FPS performance, even at 4K. Anything below that, 1440p, 1080p, you're talking literally hundreds of FPS. There was almost no stuttering or hitches to speak of. Certainly not anything noticeable anyway, which did surprise me because I'd not long watched the video that Gamers Nexus did, and they had a lot of problems with hitches lasting up to nearly a second. But yeah, there were no hitches like that whatsoever throughout my testing. But yeah, overall, if you have a 3060 Ti and you're not particularly bored about competitiveness and more just about having fun, then you can completely max the game out and get more than playable frame rates. You might have to drop some of the settings at 4K to maintain 60 plus FPS, but we're there or thereabouts already. But yeah, that's going to be all for today, so if you'd like to support me in creating these videos, I'll leave a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi page in the description down below. I'd also appreciate a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video today and would like to see more content like this. So hopefully you all enjoyed my look at the newly released Counter-Strike 2, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.